The finale of the God Valley incident really felt like the beginning and the end of this backstory. Of course, we all know that the flashback does not end here, but it felt like this was a separate arc of its own. First, we have the Herald and Loki flashback, and then it seemed like we forgot about them kind of. Really was focusing on the legendary Rox and his pirate crew. Who knows? Maybe Rox's journey does not end here, but we sure as hell know that this flashback will need to end when King Herald dies. But that's not where we are at in today's video. Today, we're going to be specifically talking about 1165. And now it's time for subscribe to Haki review. In doing so, you will help out a bearded man, which is not quite present in today's video, get some confidence to show his face on camera once again. You will also be helping him to achieve his dream like Luffy helps others. So if you wanna be like Luffy and you wanna help him out, subscribe to the channel. What are you waiting for? Just do it. Don't forget to like as well. Now, chapter 1165, Echo. The perfect name for what seems like the final chapter of the God Valley incident. The incident that would end up echoing the forbidden name of Rox into the future. The hands and swords are flying. Actual combat inside of these chapters are pretty rare. Usually Oda nowadays gives very little time for combat, so he can finish writing the story for once and go on his honeymoon, mainly leaving the fighting to the anime. So I really greatly appreciate it when he actually shows and draws this amount of fighting in the actual chapter. You can see Rox still fighting with himself, trying to do as much as possible so these guys could take him out. Crying as he batters Roger and Garp a couple of times. You'd imagine that these guys would be somewhere on the same level, or at least can fight each other equally. But the Domi Reversi is the Domi Reversi. It enhances your powers and makes you even stronger. That's why Garp and Roger are having a tough time. Conqueror's Haki is everywhere in the battlefield from all of them. You can also tell that Garp was more so in his prime than Roger when he lands a clean hit on Rox, which I believe Roger did not do in this entire chapter. Not that Garp's attack did a lot of damage, because they both got sent flying afterwards. I also really love that we get to see what happened to the remaining Rox pirates. How not a single one of them was willing to go back for Rox and save him. We get to see Silver Axe telling the fodder characters that nobody is going back. What are you guys doing? Leave this island. And as we know, Shiki also has the same mentality. And as we know, he would go on to become a Yonko after this incident. To say that we know is an overstatement though. Is it really confirmed, or is it my headcanon telling me that Shiki becomes a Yonko after this incident? You guys let me know in the comments below. The difference between these pirate crews is that the Roger pirate crew are not willing to leave the island until he comes back. But you can't really go against captain's orders, so they set sail. The exceptions are only the left-hand man and the right-hand man of the king of the pirates, Rayleigh and Scopper Gaban, going back to the island to save Roger. Is this where they encounter some of the Holy Knights? Or has the Holy Knights left already? Clearly, as I mentioned in my live reaction, which you should also check out, I will of course leave a link in the description down below, Scopper should eventually have an interaction with Saint Summers, which they hadn't had in this flashback yet. Because earlier in the arc, Summers clearly recognized Copper's face, which made it seem as though they have history together. Kaido is yet again proven to us that he's kind of a failed character. This is of course if Oda does not expand on his words and what he meant by saying that he will create a crew where violence will rule all. Why is there no explanation to his goal? Also, this contradicts his backstory in Wano with King. When he tells King, the first mate of his crew, that he will change the world, what does he mean by that? What is his explanation? If if Oda could explain that, I would be okay with Kaido's character, but if he could not, then Kaido is clearly the worst villain in this entire series. And then we get to see my goat, Whitebeard. He encounters Marco's father, which we kinda didn't need at all, because yeah, we knew that Marco was his first mate and all, but we didn't need the entire backstory and how he joined and everything. Not that we got this in this chapter, but we get his interaction with Marco's father, which by the way we called a couple of weeks back, and I will keep reiterating every time we call something that it will happen or has happened or whatever. Of course I will say it in these videos. But his name is Polo Graham, captain of the Polo Pirates. This is pretty cool. As I said, we didn't need it, but this is very, very cool. Back to the fight. A temporary truce happens between Roger and Garp, which doesn't really make any sense because they had been fighting side by side against rocks for quite a while now. Their dynamic really reminded me of Luffy and Ace on Marineford. But dynamic might actually be a bad word here, so let's go for looks instead. Their looks remind me of Luffy and Ace, shoulder to shoulder, protecting each other's life on the battlefield. Of course, Roger does the normal pirate thing that Luffy actually does a lot. He asks Garp to join his crew after this incident. But Garp is like, yeah, who will protect the other marines while I'm gone? So this is kind of an explanation to why Garp did not leave the marines, but I wished we got more of this. I wish he could expand on these words, because why would you protect the marines from Emu when you already know that Emu won't attack them if they don't oppose him? These are just my thoughts. Let me know in the comments what he meant by this. Finally, they're talking about how to deal with rocks. How if this fight continues, they will have no chance. Now, how do they actually damage these types of creatures? And I bet this will also work against the Holy Knights, and it might even work on Emu himself. Conqueror's Haki has to be apparently mass concentrated into one area and released on the enemy with full force. At least that is my interpretation of what they are saying about this. Of course, you can let me know in the comments if I say something wrong. I would really appreciate it if you correct me if I'm wrong. This technique will leave you down for the count. It will consume almost all of your stamina. That for me is very important. This technique will probably be used by Luffy to defeat the Holy Knights and Gunko/Emu when we get back to the present times. But of course, Luffy has not yet mastered this technique, and neither does he know what it means to use it. So he will need to fail a couple of times, which gives the opportunity to the other Straw Hats to shine. That is how I see it. I see that Oda has finally heard the complaints of the One Piece community and wants to do something about it. He really can write character development, hopefully, and we might see the Straw Hats shine once again, leaving the One Piece community speechless. Finally, we get more explanation on these different powers. The final attack against rocks is God of Fire, Ace from Roger, and Infinitium Explosion by Garp. A barrage of attacks that gave Rocks no chance to counter. What will happen to Rox's body? Will he end up be sinking to the ocean floor, or does Emu-sama has other plans with his puppet? All in all, Rox was a great character that intrigued the entire One Piece fanbase. The amount of theories that was going around, including my own, was absolutely incredible. His name would maybe be deleted from the history books, but the echo of his journey and the remnants of his crew would go on to shape the future for 14 years until Roger began the Great Pirate Era. This has been Haki Review. I hope y'all enjoyed this one. Like and subscribe and all that shenanigans. Follow me on the socials. Click to see my live reaction of this chapter, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.